I didn't realize you weren't on pause. So anyway, it's hot out here. There's a little dew in the air, but it is still hot out here. I thought I was gonna need my coat because of the dew, and I was thinking, well, keep the dew off me, I'll put on the jacket. But it's hot out here. So I woke up today, I did my lightweight exercises. I had me a protein drink. I was able to put my fiber, my collagen, and my creatine in my protein drink. I'm happy about that. But getting back to what I was talking about was the fact that in this age of Aquarius, it is about new, innovative, technology, right? Last night, there was a video that was saying that Jesus Christ had got his teachings from the Apocrypha of Sophia. Okay? And this is what today in smaller circles is called the Christ consciousness. Okay? And everybody was going to get a little bit of that, whether they knew it or not. Right? Back in 2017, when we had this eclipse, we were eclipsing out the old system, right? And people felt it. Not everything was eclipsed out. But then again, this year in March, I believe it was March, in March or April, we had another eclipse. And that eclipsed out more things that's not going to be needed in this upcoming era. Now, mind you, this era is going to be about 2,500 years, right? For a lot of us who think, things won't change in their lifetime, they're going to stick to the old ways, okay, if you say so. But it's here. It's here. It's now. It's been going on. It's been happening, even as I was being born, it was happening. Right? But getting back to what, my main subject is, when it comes to this power, you do have a choice about what you can do with the power that you get. Right? And I was listening to this guy, who was like, oh, all of those times, that people felt weird around you, they felt weird around you because, you were siphoning their power. Well, I don't know if you were necessarily siphoning their power, but you obviously was scanning other people, you're scanning other people's energy, for sure, right? What I didn't like about what was said was they were like, yeah, and people will want to bend to your will. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool if they want. If they want to bend to your will, that's cool, right? But then he said something that, kind of ticked me off, which was, he was like acting like if you're powerful, you have the right to scan the room, and the weak and the timid ones, will be the ones that you're going to take their energy from. And I'm like, what? That's wrong, right? That's wrong. That's inequitable. You're not going to be able to use the Christ consciousness to take away the power of those who are weaker and insecure. That's not what it's for. You obviously knew who was weak. You knew who was insecure. And you abused your power. You abused your power when you should have been giving them a dose of your power to create homeostasis. And it really kind of irked me. It did. It made me feel some kind of way. That somebody is like, oh, I'm more powerful than you, and then try to drain them? Okay. All right. Well, according to Sophia, she says no. She says, nah, that's not what she had intended your power to be. Which is what we all would fight against, is the abuse of power. We don't want people to come along and just dehumanize us. Just because they're more powerful, right? No, we don't. So, my thought is those are the type of people that will eventually come across the spiritual police, right? Because they don't believe that there's a spiritual police, but there is, right? And but they feel like they're the apex, and therefore, their job is, to use their power for bad. And I'm trying to tell them, I'm saying, what you have is a gift, right? You tapped into the collective power grid and decided that you wanted a gift. Every successful person does that. Okay? And they're tapping into the collective power grid, and they're taking this power that belongs to everybody, right? Similar, here's an analogy. The earth belongs to everybody on the world, but a power monger is a person that will want to take all of the land for himself. And most of the time it is a man, right? Most women aren't even going to think like that, because they're like, nah, that's too much labor to maintain and keep up. She'll decline that, right? However, a man, what he'll do is he'll say, well, I'll just get some slaves to work my land. So my dog told me she wanted to go walking this morning, and I'm like, my God, it's so early in the morning. at least give me until 6:45, So it's 7 o'clock now, and we're out here. And she's out here trying to find some P-mail. But like I was saying, when you were an outsider and felt like, the world had gave you a bad set of cards, and then, you've been gifted, and to think that this now is the gift was for your revenge plot, you're wrong. You are definitely wrong. Oh wow, they don't even have the fountain on today. So, and yeah, you will get taken out. One way or another. You know, and we've been hearing for the last, generation that the veil is being lifted. Because just like in any ecology, right, there's always going to be homeostasis. There is. You can't just hoard the energy all for yourself. So it also talked about how the jealous men decided, to change the narrative of the Christ consciousness, where they developed a hierarchy talking about, only one God. The God was a man, and if you wanted to get to the God, you had to go through an intermediary, and creating this whole hierarchy, which is not what the Christ consciousness was about. And this hierarchy where man is, come here, the head, where the man is the head and completely divided the left side of the brain from the right side of the brain, and therefore now, where even if you were a human being and you only use 10% of your brain, because you only use one side of your brain, they're operating with only 5%. Okay? And that's why a lot of times they do come across as, ignorant and barbaric. So, the Christ consciousness was supposed to help people avoid the suffering of not understanding the right and the left. And this is really what we're suffering in our society today. We're suffering from people not being able to unite the right and the left side of their brain because of the separation of their negative energy and their positive energy. Like, I don't know if y'all remember, but there was a group called ACDC, right? And they were trying hard, to tap into these forces. But, they were doing a lot of drugs and they wanted the power of fame and also, they didn't really have any respect for women either. So, how is that going to work out? It's not. So, one of the reasons why it's easier for women to acclimate to this new energy is because, women, give birth to people on this land, and therefore, they are usually preconditioned with the wiring to preserve life. Whereas men, they have disconnected themselves when they disconnected themselves from their family, and therefore, they've weaponized themselves to be an entity, unbeknownst to them, of destruction. Because even if you want to be an entity and grab more power from the grid, the power grid, that all of us share. We all share that power, just like we all share the land. We all share the water. We all share the air. You know, and getting back to the video that I was talking about, where this guy felt, these power surges and, and, but then, if you watch that video, that he will reveal that he is indeed operating out of pain and out of lack. If you ever seen, like, say somebody that's thirsty, they're real thirsty, and sometimes, they'll try to consume, a beverage so fast that they're wasteful, right? It's just dripping all on the sides of their mouth, but that's because they were in a lack mindset. Okay? Or you ever seen somebody that was like feeling like they were starving or hungry, and then when they finally got food, they're trying to stuff as much in their mouth and eat it as fast as possible. That's basically what these people are going through. They haven't leveled out. They need to level out, but a lot of times they're afraid to level out because of the lack mindset when they were without. This used to be pretty clear. Now it's got a lot of moss growing. Yuck. So yeah, I couldn't believe how many people thought that, spirituality didn't have laws and rules and consequences. But they do. They do. It exists throughout the universe. Laws and consequences. So, when you abuse your power and try to take too much energy and it drove you insane, you're going to be cut off from the power grid. That's all there is to it.